This is the video for you if you're currently studying for your CompTIA Security Plus exam, because I passed my CompTIA Security Plus on my first attempt, and in this video, we're going to go over 10 practice questions from Domain 2 of the exam objectives, threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations. So let's get started. Question 1. A user is analyzing accessible files and folders on a public web server using the parameter. Which of the following is occurring? Directory traversal, on path, SQL injection, or cross-site scripting? And the correct answer is directory traversal because this is an attack type that uses typically the parameter in order to access files on a public web server that user shouldn't normally have access to do if that server wasn't vulnerable to a particular exploit, that exploit being of directory traversal. On path refers to a man-in-the-middle attack, which is an attack that involves an attacker intercepting or eavesdropping on a connection between a user and a server. SQL injection is the concept of injecting malicious code into a database in order to view or extract company data. And finally, cross-site scripting, or XSS, is the concept of injecting malicious JavaScript code into a web page so that we may either steal sensitive data or display, for example, an alert pop-up message on the screen of any users who are to visit that infected website. But to view files on a server that we wouldn't normally have access to, that is absolutely directory traversal. And remember this one for your exam. Question 2. Users of an organization are attempting to visit a website which appears to be loading endlessly and no other web pages function properly. Which of the following is occurring? Hacktivist, DDoS, Shadow IT, or insider threat? And the correct answer is DDoS, or a distributed denial of service attack. Because in a DDoS attack, this involves an attacker or a group of attackers or a group of computers overwhelming a single web page, making it either load forever or just not even load whatsoever. And that is absolutely what's happening in the question here. A hacktivist is a threat actor that is motivated by political or by philosophical beliefs. Shadow IT refers to the unauthorized use of any kind of software or hardware in an organization that they didn't get the explicit permission from the IT department to perform this change. So typically you'll have something like employees who are going to disable a firewall, disable the antivirus, disable an intrusion prevention system, something of the sort, just for ease of use, because it's much faster to disable your firewall and stuff like that than it is to have those things enabled sometimes. An insider threat refers to an employee in an organization who has malicious or nefarious intentions and who will do things like take a USB thumb drive, insert it into a company laptop, extract terabytes of data, and then simply walk out of the organization and leak all that data online. But we're looking for a DDoS attack here. Question 3. A penetration tester has exploited a kernel-level vulnerability in a legacy Linux system, granting them root-level access. Which of the following best describes this process? Privilege escalation, directory traversal, injection, or account lockout? And the correct answer is privilege escalation, because this is the concept of an attacker or a penetration tester exploiting a vulnerability which results in their user account having higher level privileges as opposed to the privileges that they had previously before they had exploited that vulnerability. So in this question, they exploited a vulnerability in the kernel of a Linux operating system, which granted them root level access. And root level access is the highest level access you can have on a system. So if an attacker were to exploit this vulnerability on a Windows system, they could gain, for example, administrator level access as opposed to a basic user. Directory traversal, the concept of viewing files or directories on a web server that you shouldn't have access to. Injection refers to SQL injection, and this is the concept of injecting malicious SQL code into a database in order to extract or view SQL database information. And finally, account lockout refers to when you get locked out of your account because an attacker is attempting endless brute force attacks against that account, for example. Question 4. A user received a voice call stating to reset their Active Directory password, resulting in the attacker gaining access to the account. Which of the following best describes this situation? Business email compromise, vishing, smishing, or impersonation? And the correct answer is vishing. This is voice phishing. It's phishing over the phone. And this is the process of getting users to divulge their personal information over the phone. And the reason why this is the correct answer here, because it states that they received a voice call. And the other half of the question talks about resulting in the attacker gaining access. Well, this is the concept of business email compromise, but we could only choose one answer here. And whatever comes first, especially if they state something like a voice call, that's vishing, or if they state that the user received a malicious text message, that's smishing, and that would take priority over what happens afterwards in the rest of the question. Whatever happens first is always going to take priority, and that's going to be the answer. Business email compromise is the concept of an attacker gaining access to and compromising a business email account, such as the account of a user, an employee, a CEO, and so on. Smishing is phishing over text or SMS text messages. And finally, impersonation is the concept of an attacker claiming to be someone that they're not. So claiming to be a CEO, claiming to be from the IT department, claiming to be an employee, claiming to be a user, whoever, they're claiming to be someone they're not. That is impersonation. But we're doing this phishing over the phone, so that is a voice call, that is vishing. Question 5. A penetration tester is performing reconnaissance on the company network and discovers several unused open service ports. Which of the following best describes the importance of closing these ports? Allowing malicious scripts to be injected, reducing the attack surface and threat scope, ensures that users don't have excessive permissions, or protects against unskilled attackers. And the correct answer is reducing the attack surface and threat scope, because open service ports are live services such as FTP on port 21, SSH or Secure Shell on port 22, Telnet on port 23, SMTP on port 25, and so on and so forth. Because these can be exploited, these services can be exploited if they're not being updated or if they're not being used on that system. So you're going to want to close these ports so that you reduce the attack surface and the threat scope, making it so that the attacker can't get through this way. This answer right here, allowing malicious scripts to be injected, this refers to the concept of not using input validation, which would prevent cross-site scripting attacks, which would prevent malicious scripts from being injected. This one right here ensures that users don't have excessive permissions. This refers to the concept of least privilege, which is the concept of ensuring that users don't have excessive permissions or rights within the organization beyond what they need to perform their job. Finally, this one right here protects against unskilled attackers. Well, unskilled attackers, they probably wouldn't even know how to exploit an open service port. Unskilled attackers, they just do things like DDoS attacks, and besides, that's not even the most accurate answer here. We're reducing the attack surface and threat scope by disabling open service ports that are not needed anymore. Question 6. An insider threat received an email from a threat group with an offer stating that the insider will receive a large payment if confidential company data is extracted and leaked. Which of the following would be used to carry out this attack? Least privilege, removable media, blackmail, or hardening? And the correct answer is removable media, because this describes any kind of media that can be removed at will from a device. So a USB thumb drive, a hard drive, these are considered removable media, because what an insider threat could do is he could take this removable media, plug it into the organization's computer, extract terabytes and terabytes of sensitive company data, and simply walk out of the organization with that thumb drive and then leak all this information online, or in this case, leak it to a threat group that would pay him a large amount of money if they leak that information. Least privilege is the concept of ensuring your users don't have excessive rights and permissions beyond what they need to perform their job, because you don't want everyone having administrator level access in your organization. That would quickly result in your organization getting breached. Blackmail is the motivation associated with telling someone that if you don't do this, I'm going to do this. So, for example, a ransomware group or an organized crime group could use ransomware and say, if you don't pay us this much money, we're going to leak all your information online, which is a form of blackmail. Hardening is a broad term that describes securing your systems and reducing your attack surface and threat scope. So, disabling open service ports, disabling default passwords and changing those default passwords, disabling any kind of software that you no longer need and removing that software and removing that bloatware. These are all considered hardening. But to extract company data is going to be used using a removable device such as a USB drive. Question 7. An employee has received an email containing a link from someone claiming to be the company chief executive officer. Which of the following is being described? Hacktivist, phishing, nation state, or impersonation? And the correct answer is impersonation, because for all we know, the email didn't even contain anything malicious and no information was extracted. And the emphasis of this question is on the fact that it's from someone claiming to be someone else, and that's how you know it's automatically associated with impersonation. Phishing is the act of extracting user information, and hacktivist is a hacker that is motivated by political or by philosophical beliefs. Finally, nation state is the most sophisticated threat group in the official exam objectives. These threat groups are state-sponsored government actors that attack infrastructure in other countries, and they're motivated by things like cyber espionage and war. But since we're claiming to be someone else, that's automatically associated with impersonation. Question 8. An organization is using a mobile device manager, an MDM, to prevent users from modifying their mobile device's firmware or installing additional applications. Which of the following best describes this scenario? Shadow IT, jailbreaking, keylogger, or sideloading? And the correct answer is jailbreaking, because jailbreaking is the concept of users modifying their firmware so that they can have additional rights and permissions, and that they can do things such as sideloading, which is the concept of installing external third-party applications that are not native to the official App Store. And the reason why this was correct is because it says modifying their mobile device's firmware or installing additional applications. Because jailbreaking is associated with sideloading, but sideloading isn't necessarily associated with jailbreaking. Shadow IT is the concept of users in an organization who are misusing the software or hardware without getting the approval from the IT department to make this change. And finally, keylogger is either a sophisticated piece of malware that is software based, or it can be also hardware based, and this is a malware that tracks all the keys that are typed on your keyboard, including the escape keys, the space bar, the control C, the control V. Literally any key you type on your computer is going to be tracked using a keylogger. But to modify our mobile device's firmware is accomplished via a jailbreaking system. Question 9. An attacker has searched various forums and identified the most common usernames and passwords that come pre-installed with network devices. Which of the following best describes this process? Pretexting, watering hole, default credentials, or typo squatting? And the correct answer is default credentials, because this refers to usernames and passwords that have not been changed since you purchased that device from the manufacturer. You just used the default credentials, the default username and password that came pre-installed with that mobile device. And the most common default credentials are admin as the username and admin as the password. And you can use various forums or websites to identify the usernames and passwords that come pre-installed by default, depending on the router or network switch or whatever device manufacturer. Watering hole refers to an attack type whereby an attacker identifies the most frequently visited websites in an organization, exploits a vulnerability in that website, and then redirects all infected users to their own malicious website. Pretexting is the concept of creating a made up or fictional scenario in order to phish users, for example. So you can say, oh, I'm just a random guy online. I lost access to my credit card. Could you please send me $50, for example? That is pretexting because you're just creating some random fictional scenario in order to phish users. And finally, typo squatting is the concept of generating a domain name that is very, very similar to an official legitimate domain name that people visit. And in typo squatting, you'd hope that people mistype this in the URL bar. So, for example, one of the most common and very malicious domains is goggle.com instead of google.com because it's just a slight misspelling that users could easily type in and mistype into their user bar. But for default credentials, is associated with default usernames and passwords. Question 10. A user is bypassing a website's login panel using the statement admin or 1 equals 1. Which of the following is occurring? XSS, spraying, brute force, or injection? And the correct answer is injection because this refers to SQL or structured query language injection. And this is the process of using what is known as a true statement in SQL in an attempt to bypass existing security measures and log into the administrator's account. Brute force is a brute force attack. This involves trying endless passwords against a single user account in an attempt to log in. Spraying is different from brute force because in a password spray attack, the attacker only tries a handful of very common passwords against a few user accounts. And if they don't log in right off the bat with 3 or 4 of those passwords, they simply move on to the next account and try all those passwords against like thousands of different user accounts instead of a brute force attack, which involves trying a million different passwords against one single user account. In spraying, you try against several different accounts if you don't get access within the first few tries. XSS is cross-site scripting, is the process of injecting malicious JavaScript code into a web page. So those were the 10 questions of domain 2 of the official exam objectives. And if you were genuinely serious about passing your Security Plus exam on your first attempt, just as I did, then click the first link in the description and join my Telegram group. Because there, I post tips and tricks on exactly how to pass your Security Plus exam, just as I did. I share my exam experience. I tell you exactly what I did good, what I did wrong, and what could have made me get an even better score the first time around. And I answer all the questions that my members have. So if you have any questions about any of the questions you saw in this video, or if you have a question about how the exam works, about what things you're more likely to get tested on, and so on and so forth, then I'll be very happy to answer any of the questions that you have. So click the link, join the group, and I'll see you there.